All right, we're going to call this meeting to order. It is 2:34 p.m. on this 2nd of November 2017. Anybody else flabbergasted that they were this far along in the year? Baffling me. Oh yeah, roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Leonard.
Present.
Mr. Rudolph.
Yes, and I apologize. I have to leave at 3:15 today.
Okay, hopefully we can get through this. Mr. Maney? Mr. Van Hoek? Ms. Marmelo is here. We do have quorum with 2 substitutes today. So, as every AMATS meeting, this is a public meeting, and the public is actually encouraged to comment. Business items will be presented first by staff or consultant. After that, we will have the opportunity to discuss. Then we will open it for public comment before it comes back to the committee for a final decision. So I will let everybody know when it's your opportunity to make a public comment if you so desire. All right. So first item before us is approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Moved by Mr. Lindendude, seconded by Mr. Hart. Are there any opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Okay. And before us, we have the meeting minutes from 2 months ago, because last month I was not here being in Cameroon. There was a work session. Sharing. So we have the September 14, 2017 meeting minutes in front of us.
Move to approve.
Did you second that?
Yes.
No? Okay, so moved by Mr. Lindenwood, seconded by Mr. Hart. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, those minutes are approved. So, on to our first business item of the day. We have the draft 2018-2019 Unified Planning Work Program, otherwise known as the UPW.
Thank you. My name is Jamie Atkins, Senior Transportation Planner for AMATS. So we have the draft UPWP in front of you. There were some changes from the 16 and 17 plan. And basically those changes reflected the FAST Act, the addition of the 2 national goals, which are identified in the plan as resiliency and reliability of the system. And there's some language about stormwater in there as well. And then also the travel and tourism goal. So additionally, we have the 2015 Federal Certification Review recommendations, and we've updated the status on most of those items. Either as completed, reviewed, in progress. There were some tasks that were consolidated in the 200 elements. The non-motorized, not 230, the non-motorized task now includes bikes, trails, PEDs, the advisory committees that oversee that work effort. The 500 elements, we combined public involvement and outreach to be one task rather than having them be separate. Updated the acronyms, updated committee membership for the TAC and the policy committee. And then you'll also see a draft budget, call it the rainbow. These numbers we've updated, and they will be added into the plan by task, by year, and by funding source. So you'll be able to identify where the funding is being directed from. And then outside of that, with the budget, we did see a reduction in our planning funds. It was about $72,310. So about 2 years ago, we got an increase to about $130,000. And so that was based on the rescission that Aaron can answer more questions on if you have. And so we've had to cut back, and those cuts are primarily going to be seen under contractual services. Most of the work will be done in-house. by staff. There will still be some contractual services for Bike Life Anchorage, the coordinated plan, and some of our marketing efforts that we'll need to go out for contract for. We did have a 30-day review and comment period, September 15th through October 15th. We received 8 public comments, and then the majority of the comments that you'll see in this document were primarily work session edits. We did hold a work session, joint work session, TAC and Citizens Advisory Committee. Yes, do you not have that? You should, and they're on the table. Sorry about that. You got them? Okay. So, yes. So you have comments. We can go through them as you see fit. So since the work session was held during the public comment period, no edits have actually been made to the document yet. We wanted to bring this to you, even staff level edits. So I reviewed the draft 2018-19 UPWP. We are looking for approval to forward it onto the policy committee for their adoption.
Was there a memo for this too?
Yes, it's also on the table.
Are there any questions from the committee? And also, I guess, as far as, you said that there's been no edits made to the document based on the comments that have been received.
Right.
So the question is how we want to go through the comments as well.
I know it's stapled oddly. Evidently, this is the left top corner that you had your staple in, which is really the right bottom corner.
I don't know. What is it?
So the comments, I guess the comments that I'm looking at when they say, did they just not give a page number when they were making the comments?
Right, there were mostly general comments made.
Okay.
At the work session, you'll see by page number that we were wanting to make edits. So, general comments by task. You'll see some. And then work session, we're all. Okay.
There was some discussion on item 5. Erin, did you want?
Well, I guess my first question is, do we want to go by through
Yeah,
these
do you want-
comments, comment by comment, or do we only want to go through the ones that are either one, going to result in a change, or two, we felt were controversial? So that's a question for the committee.
There's nothing.
What?
I was gonna say, there's about 8 that are outside of staff edits.
Okay. So when we just. Okay, so is everybody okay going through the 8 comments that we received before we go through? Okay, so yes, we'll start with the first one. All streets, the question is, well, you know, whether or not this is going to apply to all streets. This is only being done in the bowl, you know, should it also be applying to local, you know? We come first, we'll go to the side that you go. Okay, yours is- Got it. So does the UPWP actually specifically say whether or not we're only doing classified roadways?
So task 211. The conversation that surrounded this was and Vivian, you can just feel free to give your experience with this as well, because Debbie Osander was concerned that the street typology that was going to be developed for Anchorage was going to just automatically be implemented in Egorter and Chugach. So there was concern there that the will of what was going on in the bowl would not necessarily reflect the will of what those communities were wanting.
Got it. And she also seemed concerned about, we said local streets were appropriate, but I think there were kind of some specific local streets that were probably.
So the language would be reflected to show that a different level of effort or a concurrent effort would be done to reflect the will of Chugach.
I think those details will be worked out as that continues to go on.
Yeah, the level of detail, yeah, in the task compared to what actually is the level of work completed, it's a balance there, so.
Any questions specifically about that? No? So number 2, AMATS non-motorized plan. Did it say that it was limited to the bowl?
It just referenced the Anchorage Bowl, so the edit will be made to reflect within the AMATS boundary.
Got it. So that is a recommended edit? Yes. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. So 292, 532, travel options, regional connectivity. My discussion only with Matsu, not also with Chugach River. So, yes.
Same.
Eagle River is a part of it.
Yes.
So-
Yeah, by the end of Debbie's comment, she was like, okay, I get it. So.
Okay. 610, recommend additional goal or leading
So we can spell this out a little more clearly. Basically, my response was that we agree with the state,
Just a
that
minute.
identify the planning task. We amend that agreement every year, so we can amend it with these tasks specifically and say how we coordinate with the MTPs. Looking at outward issues.
What is that? Okay. Any questions on that report? All right, next is the big conversation. Art, do you want to kind of summarize
Sure.
this one?
So we have a requirement to develop a transit asset management plan. All transit providers do. The MPO has a requirement to establish performance measures that include things in the transit asset management plan. The goal here was to try to link those together, have AMATS take more of a lead in spearheading that, so we're not all setting different performance measures and trying to link them up with the MPO and then later at the state. There is some concern that the state was developing transit asset management policies as well without speaking to the transit providers. So the goal was to take a regional entity like AMATS and try to spearhead that conversation.
Okay, so I have a question because I wasn't here for this discussion. So there's a transit asset management plan.
Well, we're obligated to come
Create a
up.
plan. It's, yeah, and it has to be created by pretty much a little less than a year from now, it sounds like. So I guess the question is, so this applies to both the railroad and to Peter Mover?
Yep.
Correct. So do you each have to create a separate plan or is it one combined plan?
The issue from our perspective is we each have to develop our own plan.
Okay.
But there's reporting requirements. And, which is fine, there's reporting requirements, but reporting requirements that we would do probably that would work for us are probably significantly different than what People Mover has. And the problem is that we go through multiple metropolitan area planning area things, whatever this is and whatever FMAP is. And we've got assets that roam freely between them and spend a lot of time not in either of them. And so we're trying to figure out how to report on any of it.
Well, in my
So we-
mind, I mean, there's other states obviously have both rail and transit, and I'm sure that they have to report things a different way, because rail and transit
Yes.
act differently.
Yes.
The question is just the coordination.
Well, it's not so much the differences between rail and transit, it's what we report on separately and then what AMATS is going to be reporting on. And do they align and are they comparable? Do they have the same ways to report it as we do?
For instance, I've got a locomotive that passenger train today that starts in Seward, goes through Anchorage, yay. So
Yeah.
somehow it reports to Anchorage, but then it goes to Fairbanks. And then it may not get back here for a while. Well, so what am I reporting on?
So, and my question, I guess, for the goals, I thought when we were looking and drafting these goals, AMATs themselves were not actually going to be writing those performance measures per se. It was going to be really taking the lead from Alaska Railroad and People Mover to set those goals, because we don't know their assets, nor what their goals for those assets would be as far as the performance measures.
Right, so staff had just at the AMPO conference in Savannah, and one of the intensive work sessions before the conference started was on this. And so one of the things that we really thought came through clearly was that we need to get our agreements updated, we need to coordinate these target settings, but really those are coming from the providers to the MPO. And then at that point, we can help coordinate the process, but that really is being funneled, the TAM plans and things like that, even some of the final rulemaking, it sounds like transit is a different tier than what the rail is. And so even trying to do a coordinated plan based on two totally different tiers is gonna be difficult. So I think that what we are looking for is for those performance measures and those plans to be brought to us so that we can help then coordinate that effort. But that the initial targets and the initial plans be created by the providers and then brought to the MPO, if that makes sense.
We're not the only MPO in the state, correct?
Correct.
Problem is you
Okay,
also
so then
have.
Fairbanks
So
is
you'll
really not
be-
doing,
Well, no, we won't. We're doing one.
But it will work for both, it should work
I'm
for both
hoping
MPOs.
it's going to work for both. But you haven't told us what you
Right.
want, and neither have they.
Well, and that's, in reading the FTA guidance, it's
Yeah.
really being steered by the state, or the state of good repair, those four elements. So I don't think we're gonna be looking for anything different than what FTA is asking at this point. I think what they've laid out is where we would start and hopefully finish.
because all the trainings that I've been to on the performance measures
Mhm.
have been really, you have the federal performance measures, what FHWA and FTA are saying that you have to do. If the state wants to modify those at all, they can choose to add to them, or modify as appropriate, and then as can the MPOs. But then as the lines are going, MPO reports to the state is who reports to the feds. There's usually not a direct.
Right, and so even with this funding, AMATS isn't even a recipient of the funding. So transit's direct, railroad's direct, we just bring everybody to the table. We don't receive any of the funds. So there's also that piece. So happy to participate in the discussions, absolutely. It's when do they get brought to us and how do they get brought to us? And I think we're really looking for the providers to guide that.
So the discussion, the very first thing says that the public transportation requested a task be added to develop the transit asset management plan and associated performance measures. Where was,
So during the work session, it was, Abul had asked, and basically what the conversation came down to was that there wasn't funding available to fund it with the transit planning funds. And he was looking for AMATS PL funds to fund their portion of the TAM plan, the Transit Asset Management Plan.
We'll take some too.
Well, and that's part of the discussion, right?
Yeah.
You know, our budget, you know, we've
And you just
seen-
said there was like
we have a budget-
$72,000
yeah,
budget cut.
budget cut.
So I mean, if that request were to be accommodated,
Where does it
something
come
else
from?
has to fall off, correct? Okay. Trying to make sure that I'm understanding the discussion here. So are there other questions or comments from the committee?
So the funding, isn't the funding that's already provided for the, by the FTA for the purposes of asset management planning, isn't that already kind of included in that funding?
It's a new unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's a new thing that they didn't give you more money for?
Right, we don't get any more money for it.
So you
It's
want
a new
to put the requirement on?
We would like to, instead of developing all separates, we would like to try and consolidate it and have the regional entity pay for it, yes.
That'd be fine with
We
that.
took a hit, and so we took a hit, and we have
Comes
less
out.
money. And you got a new requirement that you don't have money for.
Yep.
So.
We both did.
I would say, at the very least, at least having a task saying that AMATS is going to work on this, is right now, staff is only working on the UPWP, they're not technically working and coordinating this.
I would think that potentially it would fall under task 220 of just local planning. So, coordination.
I am not personally concerned with AMATS not taking our performance measures as drafted and incorporating them, because that's how it's been in the past. But there is the possibility that AMATS could do what they want, create different ones. You're developing performance measures for the MTP right now that include some of this, in which we have not set any yet. So that is a little concerning too. So there's some disconnects that could happen, but there is full faith that AMATS will work with us.
Make sure I got this clear. Everybody does a TAM.
Well, now they have to, right?
Well, we have to.
Yeah,
Yes.
we haven't.
I mean, we had one before, but now we have to make one of those like FBA.
You're saying there's some benefit in coordinating the reporting out of your TAM to this body. Is that how it works?
What will come out of the TAM is required reporting performance measures.
Right.
And so we're going to develop them separately. AMATS has to develop a set, state has to develop a set. We hope that they are all aligning, and that's what Jamie is saying, that they will all align eventually. We were just looking for some more direct, but yes, they will align, and we will coordinate to do that.
So the state, from my understanding, the state will develop the TAM plans for the 5311, the rural providers, but you guys, that's direct recipients, or?
Yes, we got that after we submitted this comment, I assume, with the results.
Okay. And happy to share any of the resources from that work session also from AMPO with you and Brian.
Because this is a new requirement across the US, correct? So, I mean, this is.
Yeah, it came through with MAP 21.
Yeah.
So, but the final rulemaking just recently was out a year ago. Yeah,
Okay.
so.
And
Lots to
there
get
were,
caught up
I mean,
on.
there were, I'm going to assume since you were at AMPO, I mean, that there were other.
Oh,
other
yeah,
entities who were
everybody's
dealing with
still
this.
trying to wrap their head around this as well.
Okay.
The difference between us and other MPOs is that some of the MPOs that were attending, they were doing the plan because they were receiving funds. And so some of the FTA funds, either the planning funds or the.
So they were actually doing the transit planning.
Yeah, and so we rely on transit to do the planning and the railroad to do their planning, so.
Got it.
A little bit different. We always do things just a little bit different.
Well, every place does. I mean, luckily we only, I shouldn't say luckily, but we only have 2 transit providers here as opposed to there are
7.
some areas that have, 7, 9, other places that have consolidated and only have one as a regional authority, and just every place is a little bit different, so. So what was the recommendation from staff?
So staff's recommendation was that transit would include it as part of their tasks in the 600 element, and I think some complementary language could be included under 220 as, staff level effort.
As far as
But
staff
not
support?
not the effort.
But you're asking for funding too, right? So you're saying you can include it, but at the bottom of the recommendation, you say using FTA funding.
Yeah, the recommendation is to use the funding that the providers already receive. And so staff level effort for AMATS would be under task 220 as local transportation plan review and coordination, but not paying for a full-fledged. Unless Aaron's not going to work with us anymore, or
Well, I
something
guess
else.
That's
It's gonna go.
Question, Bart, if the task is added in the 600, which is as far as I'm looking at, you know, it's the funds that really are going down, you know, that are going to transit. If we added an individual task to there to identify working on this TAM plan, I mean, then that's dedicating funds to that, or we just want to leave it as shown, having that there's long-range system planning, short-range transportation planning, and figuring out where that's going to fit into the system, I guess, into those funds that are,
For the transit funds?
yes.
Yeah, I
Do
think
we
we
actually
can.
want to see a change to this, or no?
No, it'll fit within one of those categories, because that's what we already have set up with the state. We'll work it in.
So we'll
We have
work
to
it
do
in with that in the
regardless.
600?
Yeah.
Okay. So you do not recommend actually adding another element to the 600 then?
Not another element to the
Not another
600,
task.
but just a comment in the 200 series that they'll work
Okay. Any other, I guess, questions or comments? All right. On number 6. Any questions or comments on this? I agree with staff's comments.
out. Me too.
Any questions or comments on that one? Number 7. I have a question related to comment number 7. So say that we collectively, I guess we as a MPO, decided that we wanted to have some sort of performance criteria as it relates to one of these items that Ms. Richardson asked about. We could, if we so chose, set, you know, try to add a performance measure to evaluate these sorts of things within the MTP itself, if we wanted to add a goal. I'm looking to Vivian.
Through the chair, yes. If you wanted to do that, the MTV they're still draft, and you're welcome to provide input on them.
Well, I guess my question is, I understand the WP is not the appropriate place to do this. I mean, I totally understand that. I agree with staff's comments on this. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where could we direct somebody with that sort of desire where would be the appropriate place to make those sorts of comments if they want to pursue those sorts of goals? You know, what plan, what opportunity, where could we say, you know, if this is something that you truly want to pursue, this is the appropriate place to go.
Well, as you recall, Tech Memo 1A was goals, objectives, and performance measures. And so they're not necessarily going to be set in stone. And when we do the next status of the system report, that's when we're going to be reporting on all the performance measures that are selected. And it's another opportunity to go through and review what's recommended in the MTP for what we're actually going to be reporting on.
Okay.
So,
But they would end up being specialized, and there are things we have to track and monitor, and there's all these other things that go along with it. I get it, I get the implications, so I understand your hesitation. Because I'm the one that's told you, don't do any more goals than you have to, because my people are measuring them. I'm with you, Vivian, I was just, you know, I want to make sure that people are putting their energy in the right location. Really, direct them to the correct place,
like
so.
auto maintenance costs, I mean, that's,
Nearly impossible to track.
Right.
I know. I mean, some of these really are really impossible to track.
and we
I get it.
do already do air quality for health impacts of travel. And transit delay, that is a performance measure. Well,
Not related to
No,
not equipment.
not-
Equipment, so,
well, yeah, that would be a tough one.
yes.
That would be a tough one.
All of these, yes. All of these will be
Lower income
very
households.
difficult to measure.
We can
Yeah.
measure
Yeah.
transportation cost
Oh.
per capita.
Right.
So it
Okay,
may
that-
not be low income. There would probably have to be some massaging of those
Yeah.
numbers.
Pretty sensitive information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speeding and excess traffic noise, you know, that's a monitoring thing, and, I mean, think of the data, the database, talk about database.
I know.
That would be tough to, I mean, it would be interesting.
Well, not just that, as we've discussed with all the performance measures, the difficulty is you have to establish a baseline. We don't have a baseline on any of these. So then you would not only have to establish the baseline, and how long are you going to establish the baseline for? 3 to 5 years before we can actually start looking at a trend and considering where we want to make goals as far as where it's going. No. These are not realistic in very many ways, and it's trying to figure out, you know, is there a way these can be addressed, I guess, in a different location? But I agree with staff's comment that UPWP is not the appropriate location. So, comment number 8, anybody? Next one. I guess I don't understand this comment.
So this was a training opportunity that Ms. Richardson had approached AMATS to fund in 2016. And she met with Craig and some others, and at that point we didn't have the money or time in the budget to make it happen. Basically what we outline in, I believe it's Task 510, FHWA has asked us to submit a list of all training, potential training, is it 520? Sorry, 520. And so what she would like is this Portland State University's Urban Sustainability Accelerator training added to that list. At this point, it's not been identified by staff as a training opportunity that we're looking to pursue. So,
Okay, well, it says such as, basically training opportunities such as. So there are, I mean, there is a task in here for training and development. Yep. And you can mention specific trainings? Yes.
well, not, more so specific posts.
Okay. Got it. So, yeah, it's by
Page 33.
Yeah, it's page 33. you really wanted to, I mean, you do say development and trainings, which will involve, to include attending conferences, seminars, and training sessions at, I guess you could, I guess, not limited to.
And
Or-
yeah, I would add that sometimes I've approached, Craig and said, there's this training opportunity. As long as I can justify that it's relevant to my position,
Yeah.
a lot of times.
Yeah.
What usually happens, if it's not on the list, we then have to go directly to FHWA and ask for approval. So if it's on the list,
They have to go through.
Or we have to go to
me
you first.
And then I go to FHWA. And this is
we
not
get
a
to
training I would
FHWA.
approve.
Got it. So our comment can be Aaron says no.
You can have Ms.
Blame it
Richardson
on-
come talk to me if need be, and I'll explain why not.
Okay, but we do, I mean, there's a pretty extensive list of trainings
Right.
and
Yeah.
posts and
It's,
things, and yes.
Pretty well versed in training, I feel.
I'm jealous of a lot of trainings, so I get it.
Great opportunity.
Any other questions or comments on that one? Anybody?
I misspoke. I apologize. Ms. Richardson did provide some additional comments that did have page numbers included.
Got it.
So if you
Well,
want
we can
to
continue going through them. I
work
guess
through those, it's the work sessions that really
Yeah.
take up the bulk of this,
Yeah.
work session edits. So
Yeah.
apologies for that.
So the work session comment number 9 was related to what we already discussed. That was number 5.
Mhm.
So we've gone through that. The street typologies, we discussed that one.
Mhm.
So under land use coordination, add promotes increases transit use to bullet 6, and you said agree?
Mhm.
Okay. So the next one, comment number 12, on page number 11. Are these page numbers still active? You haven't made any
It
changes,
could have,
correct?
it was probably, they haven't been changed, but she made her edits on a PDF. So
Okay, so public
they're not
involvement.
exactly.
Okay, yeah, there's a federal comment.
So her comment was on page, it's on the overview.
Yes, looking forward.
Yeah, it is page 11.
Yep.
So she was looking for an outline of the actual process. The actual process, AMATS process for public participation is outlined in the adopted plan. This is a high-level overview of things looking forward in the next 2 years. So didn't want to belabor the point of outlining the entire process.
And the public has an opportunity to comment on the public participation plan when it's developed.
And this link goes directly to the public participation page with the plan.
Okay, well, that's comment 12, that's comment 13. Comment 12, I want to go back up, sorry, skip one. It says defers to federal performance standards instead of explaining how AMATS is fulfilling local goals and standards. Okay, local goals and standards. Is this where she's once again trying to bring up like the Anchorage 2020 and the other?
Basically, AMATS as a federally funded entity, our responsibility is to address the federal piece first, and then as appropriate and such, we work through the 3C process to incorporate the local
Yeah.
will.
Got it.
But the federal process is what keeps us funded and keeps the money flowing.
Through the chair, one of the federal requirements is to address local planning, local land use information. So we are following federal regulations by following local land use assumptions.
Yes. Well, and all plans that we develop through AMATS are supposed to be consistent with local plans and policies. I mean, we take this into consideration with what we do, so.
Yes, and it's the comprehensive plan gives the direction for the MTP.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Looks like comment report is more just a comment.
Yes.
Tell them.
Okay. Page number 12, what, looks like you agree to adding state to partners, tribal community partners, so Anchorage and Eagle River.
Yes.
Okay.
I see what you were saying. everything.
Yep.
I have Aaron's edits.
Got it. Page 14, task point 10, under is required. First box, change community development to planning.
Community Development Department originally, so.
Got it.
Change it back.
That's true. Speaking of which, did anything in here say traffic, traffic division and not traffic department?
No, pretty sure we got you covered.
Got it. Okay, looks like number 17 was just a comment. Number 18.
This goes back to WOC Andrews' comments.
Got it.
Earlier.
Okay. Test 230, so you're changing Anchorage goal to say the AMATS area. Got it. Anchorage 2020 to municipality of Anchorage comp plans.
It'll be area-wide plans within the AMATS boundaries.
Because it just says Anchorage 2020, which is just limited to the Anchorage Bowl.
Got it. So instead, where does it say that?
I do.
Which task? Sorry, I'm just.
Aaron.
That wasn't calculated.
Okay, it is task 210. Prepare necessary amendments in accordance with the recommendations of Anchorage 2020 and the NTP. So,
Got it.
recommendations within, comp plans within the AMATS boundary, the 2040 plan.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry, I was missing it.
You're fine.
So page number 25, it just likes there's a quick edit. Same goes with the next one, just an extra period. On comment number 23 from Cheryl as well, it says, we note that transit task 600 contains a visioning process, but we're not planning a similar task for the MTP.
So we just need to update this task. Our visioning process was Anchorage Docks Transit that was originally intended to be developed into a short-range plan that we then implemented in 18 months. And so now we just need to update that we need to produce a short-range transit plan. Which will hopefully be a recommendation out of the NTP as well.
Okay, so are you recommending edits to that?
I will edit task 600 to take out visioning process.
Okay. Okay. So, page 30. Could be change MOA to AMATS. Okay. What is treatise?
So this is an economic development impact model.
Okay.
And so you can take a look at the transportation investments and see where they fall out in almost a cost benefit analysis, but not quite. It's based on socioeconomic data of the population.
So you're just gonna remove the reference to the program and just say that they will, evaluate transportation cost benefit analysis and socioeconomic programs to establish whether such program is needed for AMATS?
Yeah, the comment at the work session was, are there multiple tools that could do this, and do we have to, based on the competitive process, can we do a sole source, or do we have to go out for bid?
Got it. Okay.
Stephanie, I have to leave.
Okay.
But tab number 32, we will add that, and we do that now. We're part of the MTP team, so we'll just make it more clear in that task.
Okay. We still have quorum, because I forgot to say, let the record show that Ms. Buck joined us at 2:38 p.m. So we still have quorum, we're swapping numbers here. Thank you, Bart.
Yep.
So those edits, the two edits, you're gonna get those to
I'll give them to Jamie.
Jamie.
Yep.
And then, when does policy committee meet?
Policy committee is meeting on the calendar.
16th,
Oh, it is November 16th.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that we get
2
them.
weeks from today.
Okay, so you have a
Okay.
chance.
Yep, we'll do.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Bart.
Yep, thanks.
Okay. to number 20, I thought it was at 26.
26.
Task 440 gets the data verified by someone outside of AMATS. Does that say that?
So this was a comment by Bob French, and he was pushing Aaron.
You would think you would
I
say
wanna say
something.
something?
Yes.
Bob French apparently doesn't seem to accept AMATS's staff's review of the socioeconomic data. And he would like a third party to review it before it's actually used in our model from now on. AMATS used the Department of Labor
Yeah.
information. So he's basically saying that
Rather than, in the past, we've used ICER, correct?
past we've used ICER and stuff like that.
I
So
mean, we've used a variety.
we'd have to get the data, AMATS would have to get the data. We'd have to have a third party review it, even though a third party developed the data. And it's a reasonable third party who has a lot of credibility. And
there-
so it's awkward and it would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time.
So, I guess the question I have is, are there other MPOs that are having third-party verification of their socioeconomic data?
We'd have to look into that. I know AMATS has in the past had its model reviewed by a third party, and at that time it was determined that it was a peer review, thank you. It was determined at that time that it was a very good model effort. And they've only gotten better at it over time, so it'd be interesting to see if something has changed that no one knows about. But we can look into it and see if other MPOs have a third party review their socioeconomic data before they use it in the model or what.
Okay. Also, you're doing quality control reviews anyway, so this would just be trying to make it a third-party quality control review, but is it really necessary, so,
Because our data is reviewed by DOL,
yeah.
makes it,
Yeah.
staff, the public, the TAC, the policy committee. So it'd be interesting to add a fifth party into there
Yeah.
and see what they think.
Any questions on that one?
I didn't really understand the original thrust of the question by the person, Mr. Bob French, Madam Chair. But it seems like a reasonable answer.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, so the next one is, once again, community development plan. And Trumbull Public Transportation Department sections talking about land recreation. You guys agree with that one? Okay. Page, comment number 29, page 33. What is, so study area organizational structure?
So this is from the 2015 certification review. Federal review team recommends that the roles and responsibilities of the various technical policy and citizen committees be clarified and documented in concert with the current update to the operating agreement. So essentially, my understanding is at the time of this review, PCC was still listed as RCAC.
Yes.
And so that needs to be reflected in.
Got it.
through the-
Well, I guess the roles and responsibilities of the different committees and whether they're recommendatory, I mean, really, whether they're advisory or not, isn't that reflected somewhere?
In their bylaws.
And in the operating agreement
Agreement.
has some of it. We're just gonna have to make a few minor edits.
Okay.
To reflect that.
Yeah.
So for the status of this one, are you gonna say like it's in progress? I mean,
Yes.
because you've addressed some of it, you just have to finalize.
Yeah.
Okay. I know I've read that somewhere in all of the documents. Okay, comment 30, page 38. 8th bullet. Are we moving into your community and saying regional? Okay, makes sense. Page 39. So any references that you had to the Anchorage 2020 comprehensive plan, are you just making, are you doing kind of findings or
All
replace
plans
with
within the boundary,
with boundaries and AMATs, okay.
Mhm.
All right. Bart addressed comment number 32 before he left. And then that's a duplicate, it looks like.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so there, yeah, both of them say chassis 40. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee on the document or on the proposed budget in front of us before we open it for comment? Hearing crickets. This is one of the moments that I told you, all you being so patiently in the audience, waiting so patiently. This is your opportunity, if you have any comments on the 2018-19 draft UPWP. Now is your opportunity. Please state your name for the record if you do have comments. Once on twice. All right, hearing none, this matter now lies with the committee. And just because I don't have the memo, oh, yes, I do have the memo for me. We're recommending forwarding to the policy committee for their approval with these edits discussed today. Okay, so just so everybody knows.
The one that reads right. Yeah. You never wrote me down.
With edits.
Madam Chair, wouldn't it be, we recommend approval with the appropriate edits to the document? Is that
You
form of
forward,
the motion?
we're recommending approval by the policy committee with the edits.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you making such
I,
motion, Mr.
yes.
Moore?
I'm struggling to do it, but I want to move this forward.
Okay, so moved by Mr. Hart.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is that you, Mr. Young? All right, are there any opposed to the motion? Just to be clear, we have now reviewed and we are forwarding the draft 2018-19 UPWP to the policy committee for approval with the edits we discussed today. So are there any opposed to the motion? No. All right. And that is recommended for. Thank you. All right, that was our one business item. I knew this is very meaty and very timely as well. We have to move this forward. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for going through those comments. All right, the next item before us is item 6A, the informational item, the safety targets, performance measures presentation. So is there actually a presentation? Yes. Okay, I will move myself out of the way. Teresa, does this handout go with the presentation?
Yeah, that's part of Aaron's presentation also.
Okay.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Do you want me to turn off the light?
Yes, please. While we wait for the projector to warm up, my name is Teresa Brewer, and I'm a senior transportation planner with AMATS. And I know several of you already know about the performance measures that have been mandated along with targets by the federal government. Today, we're going to talk about safety targets. The state has begun to work on those. Let me see. Oh, there we go. As you know, MAP 21 said we've got to look at performance measures so that we can ensure that we optimize our transportation investment and funds. So they want to increase the transparency to the public. How are we spending our money? How can we track and monitor and make sure that we're putting our money where it is best used? So part of the new rules and the rulemaking is so that we can begin to track these and see where we're at. So the safety performance management rule, there are several different rules, but today we'll only focus on safety. Basically we can set annual targets for our area, or we can adopt a state safety targets and support that through our plans and our programming. And then also, we recently met with the state to discuss their safety target setting and methodology. And the state has already established and adopted their safety targets. We must report our safety targets by February 27th or a 180-day window. We are working together on a draft memorandum of agreement for the methodology requirements because we report to the state. We are not penalized if we do not meet our targets. We will not lose funding. It's part of the program to help us move forward to meeting these targets. So, and then also the Metropolitan Transportation Plan has to have a paragraph or some explanation on how we're going to do performance management in a plan. So that has to be included in the new Metropolitan Plan update. So why do we do this? As I mentioned earlier, we want to use our transportation dollars effectively. We need to align the MPO safety goals with the national safety goals. And the state, to be honest with you, coordinate with that to provide accountability and transparency to the public and to allow our decision makers to better use our dollars in making the right investments. So the 5 required safety targets required by the federal government is the fatality number, the fatality rate, serious injury number, serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and non-motorized injuries, such as bicyclists, pedestrians. So, as I said earlier, we've got to report our targets to DOT by February 27th, 2018. And there's different guidances from FHWA on target setting. Some of it, honestly, is vague. They've just said, go forth and do what you need to do. So we're asking, does that mean a resolution? Does that mean an email? How do we coordinate this with the state? And some of it has been a little vague. You know, do we do a policy through the policy committee? So there's a lot of available data sources for obtaining some of this data, primarily from our traffic department. There's Kim Carpenter and her group collects a lot of data on behalf of AMATS. Of course, the state. Rate of traffic fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So the traffic department is assisting us with that. And of course, the rate of serious traffic injuries per 100 million vehicle miles traveled for all public roads. So we'd have to work with traffic department, DOT, and as far as a fatality reporting study analysis. And then we would work with on the bike and ped with the state and our department also. So just a quick overview of kind of like some of the data that we already have that's existing. So between 2000 and 2012, this is what we saw as far as non-injury, injury, and fatality. Now I will say how we collect our data is slightly different from the states. Both methodologies are sound. So and then just pedestrian, you can kind of see what's happening there, where it's peaking. And then the bicycle vehicle crashes. Of course, there's no geospatial reference on these particular statistics that you've seen. In the state of Washington, part of the performance measure and safety targets, you have to look at a 5-year rolling average. And so the state of Washington did a 5-year rolling average over 10 years for each one of those targets that they've asked. for us to set. And that's a basic minimum. And to be honest, that's what I would recommend that we initially start with. If we start with a lot of targets, this is going to be overwhelming for the MPO to accomplish. Very few MPOs have done this in the country, so it may be better to start off a little simpler. So as a summary, we discussed, the number of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled and all of that. I won't regurgitate that. So DOT has adopted safety targets. They actually did it in March. They also did a 5-year rolling average, and they've put that together, and they coordinated with the MPO, and we discussed it, and they have adopted already some of their safety targets. So this is just from their particular program. So they did a rolling average with some methodology that's slightly different than ours. They incorporated some different elements that we don't have, such as, I believe, like seat belt enforcement. So I'm just going to quickly roll through this, just so you guys can get a idea. So as I mentioned, we are working on a draft memorandum of agreement that say we must have one. And it basically outlines the methodology, how we're going to report, when we're going to report, how is it going to be reported out to FHWA. And so we're still working on that and working with DOT on that. And Aaron will go over that. I wanted to say that we are working with our traffic department on the vehicle miles traveled. And that data probably won't become available until early 2018. So we're recommending that we just adopt the state safety targets because we're all working toward the same goal. The MPO has not done this previously. Anchorage probably honestly has most traffic and the most traffic accidents. So it probably, from an allocation or distribution standpoint, it probably makes sense. And then once that data is available, then AMATS can revisit that and see if we need to make changes, see if we want to adopt our own targets, and then we have to come up with a way of monitoring it and taking care of that. And then, of course, as part of our actions, we just need to review the draft agreement that's currently being drafted and under review right now. And that's just kind of the highlight overview. It's just to get you guys introduced to the idea of safety targets, how the process works. Our recommendation is to work with the state just simply because not all of the data is available, and you will have to make a decision probably in December or January in order to have an adopted safety targets in by February 27th. Now, some of the other targets that are coming up, you may decide that you want to have the MPO establish their own. It doesn't make sense to go with the states. But our feeling was that initially, since we all want to reduce fatalities and accidents, and the majority of those things happen here, that may be the best way to go for right now, to simplify the process as staff learns how to do this work. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Do you really want me to answer it?
No, you can ask it.
I'm intimately familiar with both target setting and the data and everything else. So I know really the state data, both the state and the municipality, there's always a lag in data.
There is.
So when we're
Yes,
talking,
ma'am.
when we're looking at the comparison of data, I know we're a couple of years behind, both of us, some worse than others. I guess my question, I don't know that I'm trying to think of whether, I'm pretty sure I was CC'd on the goals, and I know I was CC'd on the methodology when they were looking at the averages and what they were looking at. As long as, I know that we've always discussed that if we're relatively similar, as you identified, we have the most population, we have the most crashes statewide, so we'll have a pretty big influence on that. I guess my question is, how, at this point in time, how aggressive is the target?
Exactly, and that is something that maybe Aaron can address a little bit. But setting targets is kind of a finesse.
Yeah.
Because you may actually need to show an upward tick versus a decline, because maybe your projection out may be based on, maybe you get increased population, maybe you get more workers, maybe more people are walking. And so while the feds want to have a goal to see a decline in accidents, you may actually have to show an increase. And so there's some real interesting questions going on at the MPO level, at the federal level, and state level on some of these questions that you can take one action, but how does it affect this over here? And I would agree with you. And I know the state lags behind in some of their data. And I know we collect data just slightly different. Both methodologies are equally sound. And so it would require that when you establish all these targets or the future targets, working really closely with our data collection group and then also closely with the state.
So really the big deal right now is just we have until February 27th to decide whether or not we're saying, hey, TOT, we're going with you right now.
Right.
And then
revisit it. I would definitely revisit it, because it could be that the MPO will say, you know, this doesn't feel like it's distributed correctly or allocated correctly. We're not seeing that trend in our forecast, so you may want to adjust that.
And just follow-up question, because this is something I don't know that I've ever heard discussed. How often are these performance measures supposed to be updated? Are they with the MTP cycle?
DOT is responsible for a 2-year
Okay.
and then a 4-year. So it's really the 4-year is kind of the end of it. At the 2-year mark, if we notice that we need a change for DOT's targets, we can go ahead and make that change. And the 4-year is not, you aren't allowed to change it. MPOs don't really have the 2-year mark because they're just the 4-year.
Okay.
That's if you want to set your targets. If you don't want to set your targets and support the state, you don't really have that kind of requirement. So it varies depending on which performance measure we're talking about, but that's just state.
Yeah.
Because the other ones have their own kind of cycle, and so it's reported with the HSIP information. So they adjusted that in August. That's why you have until February to set your targets or say you're going to support the state.
Right, and there is still some discussion on what is the definition of support. And basically, FHWA has said, you decide between your local DOT and your local MPO, what does that mean? Does that mean plan and program? Does that mean a portion of the MPO's funds go to the state to invest in safety? Now, a lot of our projects, just by default, do improve safety. So that's part of that draft memorandum of agreement, trying to ferret out some of what does this actually mean and what are these definitions. And I think the benefit to us is that we're not penalized if we do not meet our targets. And so that we've got a little bit more leeway than the state does in that respect.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Can you clarify the question that's before us on this? Is the question?
There's no question. It's just a general information to get you guys up to speed on
Right.
this is going to come before you. You will have to make a decision on, do you accept the state's targets or not? And do you approve the draft memorandum of agreement, which Aaron is going to go over in a little bit.
Okay.
But clearly there are some questions we have on the draft memorandum of agreement, such as the definition of support and some other items.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your submission. Are there any questions or comments from the public on this item? No? Thank you. Okay, well then.
Madam Chair, there was
Oh, holding it?
One second, way up there.
specific railroad pedestrian data that's collected
There we go.
separately from the rest of the reporting. Is that correct? So if there are accidents that occur on the street, that's one thing. That
Yes.
Where we have head or rail, that's collected elsewhere, right?
Right.
FRA, it's reported
FRA.
FRA, but DOT also, they pull data from FRAs to make sure that they are actually covering those crashes as well.
Will that be incorporated into AMATS data collection efforts in the future?
As far as I know.
We can. I mean, anything that is reported, I will say, any crash that occurs with railroad, there is a police report as well as, I mean, FRA. So, and when you look at our crash data system, I could probably isolate if there are any crashes related to, so.
The data is there,
Yeah,
too.
the data is there, and there's ways to pull that data, I know, and to look and to evaluate that. Luckily, that is a very, 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 very small data set. Yeah, so,
And the
especially
reason-
within our MPO boundary, which is actually surprising because we have a lot of people walk on our tracks within the MPO boundary.
And the reason, pardon me, Madam Chair, the reason I bring it up is houses adjacent to our railroad
Yes.
right now
Yep.
that are coming through our office. Okay.
All right. Do we have any more presentations, or can I move back to Aaron? Well,
I don't have a
You don't,
presentation.
anybody have
So you
anything
can
else?
move back.
Okay, all right, I'm just gonna. Okay, so the next item is item 6E, the memorandum of understanding regarding federal highway performance planning targets.
Sorry. It's me. Hello, everyone. Okay, so before you have, what? Oh, state my name. I'm Aaron Yoganailan. I am the AMATS Transportation Planner at DOT and PF. Resident happy person right now, apparently. So you have two items before you. The first one we're going to focus on is the Memorandum of Understanding. So it's the 2-page document. So this is kind of an overall what's going on. That's going to be signed, hopefully, by DOT and AMATS. And FMATS has a version that they'll be signing as well. So what's required is an agreement between the state and the MPOs that talks about how they're going to develop performance measures and targets, and how that reporting is going to go, and then just some other general things like what is the definition of support, which isn't actually spelled out saying the definition of support is, but it's more of plan and program, and then show how your projects are helping to support the targets that the state has set. And we're required to do that anyways in the TIP and in the MTP, so it's pretty easy. I just got to tell you pretty quickly, the state so far has not been very heavy-handed with this for the MPO. They're keeping it pretty easy for the MPO to be able to report on anything or be involved in this. Unless you guys set your own targets, then it's going to be a little more strict because we want to make sure that we actually get something out of you, not just fluff. So if you guys are supporting the state, it's pretty much just show how your projects are supporting the targets. If you set your own targets, you're going to have to show the data and get it reviewed by DOT to make sure that it looks good. And then you actually have to send us reports on a time schedule that's kind of outlined in the agreement, the second agreement. So this first one is just kind of the basic, why are we doing this, what's going on. And this second one here, the performance planning target setting procedures, is the more detailed one. There's a lot here, not really going to go into too much. We're giving it to you now to have you start looking at it so you can provide comments and feedback to AMAT staff and myself about issues, concerns, or changes you would like to see. This is going to have to come before you guys soon. It does need to be in place by March, I think March of 2018. So we're hitting that mark pretty quickly. So in the next couple of months, it'll be coming before you for a recommendation to go to the policy committee for signature. So I do have to point out really quickly, these agreements are only for FHWA side of things. So we talked about performance measures for FTA and FHWA. FHWA only for this. FTA will be a separate agreement between the MPO and the transit providers is what we're anticipating. The reason for that is our DOT headquarters does not get involved in your guys' transit operations, excluding railroad. I'm not sure how they handle that because I don't ever get asked to participate. But for People Mover, our headquarters does not get involved in it other than just making sure the money is passed through. So they felt that it was not appropriate for them to say, here's how you will set your targets. They said it should be between the MPO and the providers of transit instead. Work together on how you want to be able to do the reporting. which it feeds back into what we were talking about earlier, why it's assumed the MPO is just going to pretty much take whatever the transit providers do for their targets and performance measures and go with those.
I guess a question related to that though.
Yes.
Because it's still, as far as I know, we as an MPO report to DOT and DOT reports to the federal bodies.
FTA is a little funny like that because I don't actually know what the because I don't know what the responsibility of DOT is for our transit providers on this.
Okay.
For the rural transit providers, it is like that. But for our transit providers,
Report directly.
To FTA.
yeah, it's a little different. So they have to give the targets and information to the state, but it's not the same as if we were rural providers.
Okay.
So that's why the agreement is going to hopefully between the MPO and the providers.
Okay.
So that'll be coming probably about the same time as this one. You just don't have it because we have unfortunately not started on it yet. There was a little kind of miscommunication on what we were supposed to do for that. So this big document just talks to you about the sharing of data if you guys are going to do your targets. It talks about the selection of performance targets if you choose to select them. Reporting of those performance targets and data if you choose to do so, and then collection of data, and then who's going to be responsible. DOT is going to be responsible for this, and the MPO is going to be responsible for that. Pretty basic. It's modeled off of another MPO, I believe Idaho is who they stole it from, and kind of have started working on it. I don't really know what else to say about it. It's pretty cut and dry, so it's trying to keep it simple and easy for the MPOs, because the state recognizes that this is a huge task that requires a lot of time and effort by MPO staff and transit staff to do these performance measures and targets. And I say performance measures and targets because you have the opportunity to develop your own measures, not just targets.
Yes.
So,
I'm just really disappointed because I'm gonna have to read some code of federal regulations again, and it's been a while since I've had to do that.
Madam Chair, may I add, the actual map 21 says that the state will make an agreement with the MPO and the public transit agencies. It varies on what you're going to hear from FHWA, so that's what the code says, but you get different answers from the people that are implementing the law. So one of our concerns was that transit should have been brought to the table early on. We requested it at the initial meetings, and people read the code differently.
Yeah.
And so that is one of our concerns, that public transit is not on this agreement. But as I said, we're getting different guidance from FHWA.
Yeah, all the trainings that I've been to to discuss performance measures, I've done FHWA performance measures, targets and measures, not FTA. So,
Just speaking from experience from the conference recently, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, down to some of the flow charts and the checklists that they have. It's the closest to actually telling you what to do as I've ever seen from from a federal agency. So I was happy to have some of that guidance to go off of.
okay.
So
That's
I mean,
from FTA?
FTA. They're providing templates. They're providing all sorts of things, at least for some of the smaller providers, like the tier 2, which People Mover.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some good stuff coming out from FTA.
So in relation to this, there will be other performance measures, targets that'll be coming to you guys for review. There is the pavement and bridge, which it's the assertion of the state that they own the NHS ones for the pavement and bridge ones. So it's going to be what do you guys want to do? They're recommending you guys support the states because you don't really collect a lot of that data. So it'd be interesting for you guys to start collecting it to do your targets. But it's up to you.
We do collect pavement condition.
On NHS routes?
Well, yes. We
Which
have to do it
ones?
on-
Well, I know Lake Otis.
Lake Otis is
and
now an NHS. Yes.
Are, so,
And we do.
but, 2 of the
Yeah.
X number, so.
Yeah. On
But-
our corridors, and yes,
Yes.
I mean, most of the NHS corridors are yours, you know, but we do have information for ours as well. so.
I mean, as a state person, I look at it, okay, support the states, but in reality, as an MPO supporter, I'm like, well, you may eventually have to develop your own targets because your version is different than the state's version of things because you have a more limited area. And so you may be more impacted by only a couple of things not functioning where it's supposed to be versus the state, which is able to absorb a couple more than the MPO is. So it'll be that. It'll be CMAC. There'll be a CMAC one coming through. You guys are eligible for that, unfortunately. So that'll be a big one. Travel time reliability index for cars and freight. So
Oh, yeah, that's.
yes, I know the state's having a hard time with it too, so we're in the same boat with that. And so we haven't done much on it yet. We're just now kind of starting. We had an initial meeting for pavement and bridge, I believe, to get things rolling on that. And we're doing meetings with the MPO staff and both FMATS and AMATS soon, I hope. So we'll keep you guys updated on what's going on with that.
Just for anybody, I guess, on the committee, periodically there are opportunities. I know DOT has had some trainings regarding the performance measures, and I've tapped into those just to keep my finger on the pulse, since a lot of the data, I mean, the raw data ends up coming from my department and my staff, and I want to make sure that I know what's going to be required of me and what we're looking at, and it's been very good to date. I mean, really, the information that they've been providing, and at least you get FaceTime with some folks from FHWA and otherwise, really, that I have emails and names of people that I can contact if I have questions. So if you ever have any questions, reach out to one of us. We have some really good resources here, but if you ever see any of those training opportunities, I recommend it because it is it's interesting. It's at least interesting. It's kind of cumbersome. I'm not gonna lie, that this is cumbersome, but as, you know, when you're looking at how federal dollars have been spent in the past, one of the reasons for these performance measures is to make sure that your federal dollars are being spent in a responsible manner to actually move towards the goals and objectives that you have in a lot of these things, and that you're making strides in pavement condition and safety and your operations as it relates to freight and everything else. So, I mean, it's making sure that you're making sound investments. So it's checks and balances. It's just timely.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. Are there any questions or comments for Aaron about either of these? So they're going to be coming back to us when?
I was actually just asking Jamie when we needed comments by. So
Yeah.
today is the 2nd, so if we can have it by the end of the month, by the,
When are you hoping for a business item, I guess, is what?
whenever we can get it done. Because the states, that our headquarters folks, I said this is good to go on their part. So if you guys have changes, we'll need some time to be able to go back and forth and try and get those edits done. So if we can have a November review of this, I know Thanksgiving's in there, so if we can have your guys' comments to staff by the 30th, we can get December to review and edit them and maybe bring it back in January, and then it still gives us a month or so lead time or availability in case we need to push things back some.
Okay.
So November 30th, if you can get your comments to
AMATS info.
who is sending it? It needs to go to AMATS because then
Yeah,
AMATS will
send
send
it
it
to
to me.
AMATS info and
AMATS info.
AMATS info at muni.org.
Yep. Yes, please.
These documents were not on the website for Link to be able to look at. Is there a way we can get these out to the community members
Yes.
with the?
We'll have to be sending them to the policy committee at kind of the same time as well, because we need to give them an opportunity to be able to
Yes.
review it. So I'll work with Craig or Jamie next week, Monday, to send them out to you guys in the policy committee to have reviews of them and stuff, and let them know the same information.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Are there any questions or comments from the public? Thank you very much, Aaron. And last but not least, our informational items
Thank you, Madam Chair. This weekend kicks off our big 3-day public charrette at the Denina Center, and I have flyers here. I can give each of you their sessions on Saturday, breakout sessions for bicycles, pedestrians, roads, and transit. And Monday and Tuesday complete the charrette. On Monday, we're having a public discussion about transit supportive corridors, transit-oriented development, and land use, and how it all ties together with transportation. And it's an opportunity to tell the public what we've been up to the past several years. So it's something new. Monday and Tuesday, Monday evening, I think it's from 5, is it 5 to 6?
Yes.
5 to 6. The mayor and the chair of the policy committee will be with us to welcome the public. And then all through the charrette, our consultants are going to be pulling together what we've heard and developing some draft concepts that we're going to put out for a 30-day public review period. And we're going to bring those draft concepts also to the Citizens Advisory Committee, the TAC, and Policy Committee for approval. So, yeah. So, this is our big deal. We're going to have refreshments, if you're interested in that.
There will be coffee.
Yeah, we had entertainment, but we don't. But I think the venue is very nice for this. Think about the city we live in.
So you said Saturday is transit, bikes, peds, roadways, different breakout sections. Monday, public transportation, transit corridors, and
Just for a little while.
And then looks like Tuesday you're having your freight.
Yes, sorry,
Okay.
yes. Right.
I was just thinking the joint work session. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
You have received an invitation for a joint policy committee and TAC, thank you very much, work session to review what the consultants are going to share with the public that evening. So if you want to get a first cut look at and tell us if there are any showstoppers for you all, especially the policy committee, we need to know from them, deal breakers, those kinds of things. It would be really helpful to have you all be there for that.
So that is scheduled for Tuesday, the 7th, from 1 to 2:30.
Yes,
Okay. And that's at the Nina.
yes. We have, the website has been updated to show the results from the MetroQuest survey number 1. It's pretty interesting if you want to look at it. We've heard from, I think, there were 200 respondents, 400 comments, something like that. A lot of people commented, and what we're hearing is way different from what we heard in 2005. It's really different. A lot of what people want destinations for bicycle and pedestrian means, and one of the things I found very, very interesting. Keep in mind, this group probably does not represent the whole city, but a lot of people look like they might be willing to accept a little bit of congestion and focus on some other things. So that's kind of new. I would suggest that you go to the website and just take a quick look at that to get a sense for what we've heard so far. And people are also interested in, for heaven's sake, new technology, automated vehicles. So there's a different crowd out there than what we've been hearing in the past.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions or comments from the review? Any questions or comments from the public? Good luck. There's going to be a couple days of lots of information being shared. All right. Are there any committee comments at this time? Are there any comments from the public before we go to the order at this time?
Madam Chair, I would like to share with the committee that today is Teresa Brewer's last TAC meeting. Unfortunately, we are losing her to Arkansas. So I should probably let her share her news with you.
I am going to Frontier NPO as the new executive director there.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it'll be hard to leave Alaska. I've been here a long time, but sometimes you gotta try something new in your life and challenge yourself, so.
So what's the name of the MPO?
It's Frontier.
Okay. Arkansas.
Arkansas, you know. I would never imagined it.
I'm just thinking, why can't we call ourselves Frontier? I mean, we are.
Rebranding.
We just changed the logo. Let's do, no.
I got it.
So how
Don't make
long?
me do a community
How long
pool
have you been in
again.
Alaska?
Almost 30 years.
Oh, wow, that's a big change then. And how long have you been dating us?
About 11.
Yeah. So I knew you predated me. It's my whole 6.5 years you've been here, so. Thank you very much. Well, I joined the committee really, and I guess a round of applause, and it was farewell to one of our members. Good luck, and hopefully you can reach out and tell us about how you guys are dealing with performance measures.
They are in the same spot.
Yeah. Are there any other comments at this time for the good of the order? All right. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. It is 4:05.